Kirsten Hoffman, you may know her. Yeah, I this video is we're taking this video in order to kind of describe life transition from before Christ, and then after Christ, and how we're growing. And this first one is for what my life was like before I met Christ. And my relationship with Christ was born a lot out of transition, and I think a lot of people I grew up in the church, and I pictured my relationship with Christ being born out of a moment, kind of like a Damascus Road experience. There's a light, something divine, very, 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 very like an instant, an instantiation of sheer purpose. And now all of a sudden I go from, oh yeah, this is how I was operating, and now I'm operating this way. And that's not really how things in my life moved. But we'll get to that. Before that season happened, I had a great childhood. I grew up with two parents who loved me in the backwoods in Arkansas, and ran around the woods all day and enjoyed life. I grew into as I grew into a young man, I began struggling with a lot of the things that all young men struggle with. Some sexual morality, and that had a variety of flavors as I was a teenager and into young manhood. And what I noticed is that no matter how I was, when I was caught or when I talked about it, no matter how much I was warned of the dangers of those decisions and those sin habits, no amount of fear or concern of consequence ever stopped me from doing it. You really, you got all the metaphors for a person before Christ, right? And one of them, I think I heard a lot, was you're like a guy blindfolded running to the edge of a cliff. And the problem is the guy that's blindfolded, he wants to, like, that's what he wants to do. He wants to run off the cliff. And his natural reaction to somebody grabbing his hand and telling him there's a cliff is to kind of like jerk away and say, no, this is what I want to do. It's irrational. It's fear and pride. It's driven. There's no good in it, but that's reality. When you're a slave to sin, I think, and I was very much so. Again, two great parents, and so there wasn't a lot of early childhood trauma to drive me to this. I just developed a sin habit that I used to medicate in place of a relationship with Christ that had not yet developed. Although I could banter about Christ with the best of them. I am my mother and my father's son. My father is a very good debater. My mom, a very good orator. My mom speaks really well. My dad's got a great mind, and so put those together, and I'm the product. And so I could tell you what you wanted to hear if you were looking for validation to see if I was walking the right way as a young man, which I think that's the state of a lot of young men is they've learned the sound bites necessary to placate anyone that comes asks. Even if they know it's a load of crap. Even if they know their life doesn't at all represent what they just said, they just know that this is the answer to the question that was given to me. And I've learned that diligently through muscle memory. So that was me, very much so. I got through high school, went to college, got away from the way things were done. And the irony is despite the fact that I was really well loved, and my parents had a high regard for moral value, and they weren't really helicopter parents though. Like I didn't have a curfew in high school. I didn't have a lot of restraint put upon me, and somehow throughout a lot of my before Christ process, I was, I somehow avoided a lot of some of the bigger poor decisions that some kids my age make and still make. I still can't explain that. There's some moments that I should have. I should have made some pretty life-rocking, poor decisions that would have changed the direction of my life, and I would have been robbed of some opportunities, but I didn't. And looking back, the only thing I can say is that the Lord had picked me and chosen me long before I ever chose Him, and He was slowly walking me to the point where I would love Him like He loved me. And the whole time He was protecting me from some of those dangers. I didn't care about Him at all. His name was a way to get what I wanted, or to avoid being investigated. That's what He was to me for a long time. Just an intellectual pursuit, or bricks to build the citadel that I lived inside of. So got through college, and the whole time I was hiding this sin struggle. I confessed it to some brothers, and we like, you do the thing you do whenever you're that age, trying to overcome sin. You start the accountability partners, and you do all that stuff. And nothing ever really worked long term. And so I got to the end of college, and I became very, very depressed. For no other reason than I think I just got tired of trying so dang hard. I really think that's it. I think I'd been trying so hard for so long that I just got tired and resigned, and was looking around for the next choice, the next season, and was thinking if I could go to work right now, but what am I going to do? Like, I'm pretty empty. A guy had recruited me to do, a guy had shown up on our campus that I had known because I worked at a sports camp called Kennecott. And we had a very brief conversation while I was on campus about an institute that was a 9-month kind of miniature seminary, and that's kind of where things started to transition. Another point of note that I think contributed to a lot of my slavery into sin in my high school days was my parents split up when I was 15, and all the ensuing damage that and this is something that if some of you kids are going through this, this is just some free advice, is you have no idea how it's going to affect you, and you're probably going to hope it won't affect you, and you may even tell people it won't affect you, but the decisions your parents make, whether or not it's on your behalf or not, they will affect you. And your best hope of your relationships in the future being as healthy as possible is to reconcile with both parents. Even if you love one and hate the other, reconciling with both of them to the best of your ability is your best hope of healthy relationships, especially romantic ones in the future. So there's a little free piece of advice. It's not really the point of the video, but something I'm really passionate about. So yeah, I think that's kind of what things were like for me before Christ. Hello again. So the first video was kind of life before Christ, and then this video is the kind of the transition period, however that looks. And I mentioned in my first video that my regeneration wasn't like, I think I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I had this expectation to be kind of like, one day I was one way, the next day I was another way. That's just not how it was. That wasn't like my experience. My experience was more like the long game dating. Like, the Lord wooed me over a very long time, and it was wooing me before I even knew I was being wooed, and removing obstacles, protecting me from things, getting me to the point at which I would make a very critical decision. And that decision was this one. I was on college campus, depressed, really struggling with next steps, really struggling with my identity. Even while knowing here not all the truth, but the basic principles of what who Christ was and what he did for everyone. Yeah, my heart was still very cold. And so anyway, ran into this guy that I worked with at camp at Kennecott, and he said, "Hey man, I don't know what you're doing after college, but here's this thing that we started 10 years ago, and it's 9 months of you deferring the rest of your life so that you can take 9 months to study the Word and become literate, very, very literate, both in God's Word and also in His community and His people." And I, took the paperwork, whatever, and I graduated college, and I was looking around, and I just I need to do something that will change things. I didn't like who I was very much, I don't think, at that point. I think a lot of people liked me, but even I questioned that, because I think there's the sin and the identity thing that I didn't like who I was. So I went, I worked my butt off that summer and raised the money. My father went in half with me, and I went to that Kennecott. It's called Kennecott Institute, for those of you who are looking for, and I'll always put a plug in for them. If you're looking to do something after college, that if you feel like you don't have the grip on the Word that you want, or you feel like you never experienced a good biblical community, go spend the money, go take 9 months, and go to the Institute. You won't regret it. So shipped out for the Institute, and I met, there are a few key people that I met that I think are worth talking about while in this next few minutes of the story. One was a guy by the name of Brad Ashby, who would later officiate my wedding. A guy by the name of Ben Savory, and then a man named Chad Hampsh. And those three guys were very critical in this next stage of my life, which would turn me away from purposelessness to life. So where did they all stick? So Brad was a guy I met on a TP deck at Kennecott K7 in 2010, and he was the first guy I met and spent any real time with that I walked away from and thought, he's really doing it. All these other guys are just kind of got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but he's doing it. He loves Jesus. He loves him so much, and he's a man. And he's not some sissy that goes to church and hides from his wife and kids. And I had this thing in my mind of what guys turned out to be when they went to church for 30 years, and it wasn't pretty. And that's not all men. That's a child's way of looking at the world, but that's what was ingrained in my head, I think, from childhood. And Brad was one of the first men I ever met that I walked away from a conversation with him and thought, that's a man who loves people, who loves the Lord, who loves he was engaged at the time. He's now his wife, who loves his fiance, and he's doing it, and he's happy, like he's joyful, and I want that. And he wasn't the only one, but Brad was the guy. So then, fast forward to 2011, fall 2011. I entered the gates of KKY, which is where the Institute is held. I get a roommate, and we start taking classes, and right there at the beginning we did a thing called cleansing and filling, and we were assigned an accountability partner. I don't know if assigned, I think we picked ours, I can't remember, but anyway, I might as well have been assigned, because it was with divine provision that Ben Savory entered my life. Ben was and probably is still, just a firecracker of a man who kind of came from the wrong side of the tracks and had been dealt a pretty tough hand in life. And then he ran into Jesus, and from then on it was all gravy for him. Everything he saw, he just saw good. And he saw it in me too. taught me how to fight. He was like 18 months younger than me, and he taught me how to really fight for holiness. And all the time he was whispering to me good word, good encouragement, and things I needed to hear, that my soul needed to hear, that I'd never heard. Sometimes I didn't want to hear. He got me into the gym for the first time. We started working out together, and we did this thing, and it was stupid. But every time any one of us, we set up an accountability thing because we were told to, and anytime any one of us struggled in any way, we would confess, and there was payment, which is not at all how Christ operates. That is just two guys being stupid. So this is not what I'm about to describe to you is not a biblical. In fact, if anything, there's biblical precedent warning against it. So this is just two guys being stupid. So do not take this as gospel. But anytime we would mess up, we had to jump off this like 60-foot tower into this water, into like a river. And the problem is that this river flowed out of the bottom of another body of water that had been dammed up. And I don't know if you know Branson, Missouri that much, but Table Rock Lake is one of the lakes that's very close there in the Ozarks. And then there's a river that flows out of it, and Taneycomo River flows out of the bottom of that when they release so much out of the river per day. And you can imagine if you have a dammed up lake and you have the water flowing out the bottom, what the temperature of the water flowing out the bottom is going to be. It's never above like 45 degrees. So anytime you messed up, you climbed to the top of that tower, a 60-foot tower, and in your skivvies, and you jumped off into that 45-degree water. It made you rethink things. And that's how we made war. Not just that, we prayed together, we worked out together, we ran together, we talked together, we told each other our stories. That was the first time somebody ever heard my last 5%, was then. I told him everything. And I started to heal. And over the course of those 9 months, I fell in love. And for the first time, I realized I loved him. I loved the Lord, not because of what he could do for me, but because of what he had already done for me. Because of who he was and what I knew about him based on study and having my nose in the Bible 4 hours a day, and then for homework that evening. It's all we did. We lived and breathed the word for 9 months. It's all we did. And I remember I got a job because I wanted to go out to eat and stuff. I was a poor kid. And I worked part-time at a steakhouse, and I worked late on a Saturday night. And I remember this was like, we got there in September. This is probably November, so it was cold. And I got off, and it was like 2 a.m. It was a long night, and I was tired. And I drove back to the campus, and I got out, and we parked we didn't park in the actual campus. You had to park kind of away and walk to campus. It was a bit of a walk. But it was a nice walk. I mean, it was a beautiful night. And I got in my car, and I'm walking down, and it's just dead quiet. There's nobody else out. It's 2 a.m. I'm like covered in food and just ready to go take a shower, go to bed. And I looked up and just saw the stars, and my mind started thinking, and I realized for the first time in my entire life, in 20 years, 19 years, how old was I? Oh, sorry, no, I would have been 21. For the first time in 21 years, there was nothing between me and the Lord. That everything was, that I that was clean, like really clean, like not like I felt close to him for the first time, really. And that was just the beginning. And then it was fighting tooth and nail to change disciplines to match the overwhelming sense of love that I'd begun to feel. And I had friends to help me do it. And so we did. And then I worked at camp for the following 4 years after the Institute. Graduated and, formed some pretty lifelong friendships there. And, got recruited to work at a boys' home pretty quickly after that. And this is where the next season, I think, starts. And the guy that was probably one of the guys that was most critical, his name was Chad Hampsh. We'll talk about him in a minute. So the last video is kind of how I have grown and am growing in my walk with Christ, and how that looked at, I think, probably. And it might be useful to describe it in a couple of different phases. One was right after I became a believer and was a single guy with, dating was on my mind, but I wasn't dating anybody, so it was very just kind of taking life 1 month, 6 months, 1 year at a time type thing. Worked at camp for 4 summers, and then and during the school year after camp, I worked at a place called Future Men, which I have talked to some people about, but it's a Christian-based boys rehabilitation center where people, families who are really struggling with the directions that their sons are taking in the early to mid adolescence, they send them to us, and we help them get back on track, basically, is probably a brief way to say it. But that's a brotherhood of guys working for that facility. We developed some really good relationships, but probably one of the biggest ones that I really have time to tell you about today that helped me, I guess, journey into manhood after having become a believer was Chad Hampsh. Chad is the associate director of K7 and also the vice president of the Kanakuk Institute. So I spent a lot of time around Chad. Not what you would call a charismatic man, although he's great in front of an audience. But Chad just taught me so many things about so many things when it came to being a believer. And I think one of the most basic things he taught me was that when life isn't about you, you don't have to take it so seriously. And I think I took life very, very seriously back then, and still oftentimes do. But Chad just taught me how to play basketball. He taught me how to use power tools. I mean, I guess I probably knew that before, but we just did so much together. He taught me how to have conflict resolution. He taught me how to discipline somebody that was underneath me in a biblical manner. He taught me how to take responsibility for my own spiritual development. Just so many conversations over so many years. Chad was there, and I think being available probably was his greatest asset. He just was always around, doing ministry, being a force for the kingdom, and building K7 up. And while we were doing that together, there was just always opportunities for me to learn something new or unlearn something that was not good. And I think that's probably something that's useful for young men and young women, young people who feel like they're very early in their relationship with Christ and don't know what to do next. You need to attach yourself to someone who look at and go, I want to be like that person. And the thing that I learned being underneath Chad was the people who you're going to respect, the people that you want to be like, who are kind of down the road a little bit from you, are going to be busy. And that's probably why you want to be like them, is because they're crushing it. Which means they don't have time to chase you around. You have to chase them. So my advice is find somebody to attach yourself to, and then you be the one driving that relationship, and driving the times that you get to spend together. Because they're probably chasing kids. They probably have a spouse. They probably have a full-time job. They probably have extracurricular stuff. They probably have volunteer work they're doing for the kingdom, for the church. I mean, they don't have a list of potential people that they're calling that might want to set up a time with them for a one-on-one. They don't have that. They're living their life, and you have to kind of get in the way a little bit. And they're happy to take that. People like that are happy to include you, but you have to approach, because they just don't have time. So Chad walked me into manhood in so many ways, and the years passed, and I learned through lots of Bible study, lots of prayer, and lots of community, lots of love. I learned how to be a believer. I learned how to start walking like a Christ follower, and it was slow. Off-putting old sins it's slow. It's not fast work often. If it is fast work, it's because the Lord has a very specific task He wants you to do, and He provides the method for that, not because people are very good at taking old sins and getting rid of them. We're not. So yeah, fast forward, beyond that season, moved to Austin, got a job. I'm still a single guy and still looking to date. And that's another thing. I've got your ear. What I hear a lot of young people say about dating is it's hard to find somebody high quality to date. You want to find somebody high quality to date, become somebody high quality to date, and the other one will show themselves. Guarantee you. Stop worrying about finding somebody that you really think is high quality, and pick up your toolkit and start working on your own life. And then you wake up one day and you'll have grown into somebody that you kind of actually like, and then guess what? Somebody else will too. So water your own fields. Stop looking around at everybody else's and trying to find the field that you think you can pair yours with. And I guarantee you'll wake up one day and you'll have stumbled your way into somebody that you do not deserve. And so there's another piece of advice for you. Growth now, I think, probably is the last thing. What does growth now look like? Growth now looks, I think, different than it has in the past. I spent my 20s working low-end jobs. A lot of my friends went straight into careers. I didn't. I did the Institute. I did Future Men. I did camp. I worked I worked as a server. All the way up until 2015 when I began my career in construction. So I guess for 6 years, I spent my early to mid 20s being with people and learning how to be a good brother, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father. Long before I would ever fill those shoes, I just watched other people do it, and spent a lot of time around people who were doing it well. And it was kind of like boot camp, for being a believer those years. Very focused, very precise, and a lot of concentration on just that. And then you move into a different season when you're kind of the one providing the umbrella for those things for other people, and you're the one that has to take responsibility for making sure that I now take care of. I have a full-time job, and there are other things that are involved in my life now, and so the amount of concentration that exists for biblical study, I can't do it for 4 hours a day anymore. There's no way. But tell you one thing that I have been able to do um, is my job provides a very unique outlet for me to attract young men and spend a lot of time with them, um, and talking to them and ministering to them. And I think one of the two or three things that I do now that probably helps me grow best is it's easy to see yourself in young men that you work on, that are young people that you work with. And it's also easy to realize, I'm highly motivated to be attuned to the Lord when somebody else is watching me. I think somebody else is looking to me for leadership. Somebody else is looking to me to give them not just occupational guidance, like not just guidance at a job where I give them employment, but also like encouragement and love in a way that the world doesn't understand. And whether they voice that or not doesn't matter. That's what they want. That's what everybody wants. And so, if I'm going to be a good believer in my role as an employer, then I'm giving that to them, whether they think they need it or not. And then I'm buying myself space for some real estate in order to give them words that when I was their age I really needed. Things that changed, that set me off this course and onto a better course. And you have to buy that. You have to kind of purchase that moment with time and sweat and energy and conversation and honesty and vulnerability. You can't just walk up to a young person or walk up to anybody really and say, "Hey, this is the way you should be doing things." They may be kind and polite and absorb that, but the people who changed me with their words bought that moment with action long before they ever took that moment, and they said that one thing that changed things. And you want to attach yourself to that person when you're young, and you want to become that person when you're old. Chad kept me, whether he knew it or not, he kept me from making so many poor decisions by just being him. He didn't have to surgically find the thing that I was struggling with and fix that one thing. He just was him, and when he needed to step in, he did. And by proxy, I mean, just an example, I probably would have married another woman if it weren't for Chad. And she would have been okay. It would not have been as good. And that's what you want to be. You want to be somebody who helps somebody else go from good to better in choices, just to get them to a place where they can look back and all they can feel is gratitude to both the people that were involved in their life and also to the Lord from all the times that people have stepped in to help them. So that's one way I think I'm motivated and I can grow, is just that relationship makes me grow. The other two things probably are a small group, which Austin Oaks, I think, plugs that pretty regularly. But it's true. I mean, whether you think you need it or not, if you've ever not had it for a long amount of time, and then you ever really have it, authentic community, man, the difference in your heart is so palpable. It's huge. You have to have good community to be a good believer. I don't care what anybody else says. If somebody else is telling you something different, then they've never been on both sides of that. Because if you have, you understand how important it is. And then the third thing is, and I'll be honest with you, the spiritual disciplines that my life was so full of as a young man, and I still am a young man, but as a young 20s man, they're the first thing to take the back seat when life gets hard. And the irony is they are the thing you need most when life gets into a struggle. And so, but the best way I grow on a daily basis is spending time with the Lord. And here's the thing. Here's the thing that I think probably is good for young people to hear when it comes to this. That doesn't always just mean sitting at a coffee table with a cup of coffee and your Bible and a notebook. It doesn't always just mean that. I'll have my affections stirred up for the Lord while watching a movie that I really love, that has thematic, biblical themes to it. Listening to a song or a conversation with a friend, or there are other ways to stir up your affections for Jesus. And there's some videos that I watch on YouTube that are they're written and edited by a guy for the purpose of honoring the Lord, and he's got such a hand that every time I watch him, I go from feeling like kind of neutral and maybe even passive to actively desiring the Lord by just watching him. And you all know what that means when you feel like you want to be with him as opposed to just passively like moving through your day. I think everybody understands the difference between those two. So you need to find whatever it is that triggers you and triggers your affections for the Lord, and collect those in a basket. And then when you approach the Word, or you approach prayer, or you approach accountability, or whatever, and you're reaching for the desire, and you're reaching for the feeling, and you don't find it, reach in your basket, pick out something that helps stir your affections for Christ, and use it. I mean, that's why they're created. That's why we have art. And I know what the world says about art. We have art so that when we observe it, or we observe nature, or we observe things written about nature, or about life, and about people that stir us up. They stir us up so that we can roll up that desire for intimacy to the Lord. That's the point of art, is in movies and things like that. I mean, when they are done at their best and an honor to God, when you watch them, you want to be with Him. That's the point. So find those things, put your basket together, and the songs that you like or whatever, and so that when the word feels dull to you, the words don't jump off the page, you can't connect very well. Reach in your basket, grab something, watch it, listen to it, talk to somebody, and then take 15 minutes, and then come back to the Word, and that's been a thing that I have found helps me. Then I feel like I don't feel like I'm reading some sort of academic black and white book. Now I feel like I'm talking to someone. Now, when my desire has been inflamed for the Lord, now I feel like I'm being talked to by the Word instead of just reading a book. And I think we've all had those two experiences where one feels like I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, and the other feels like the Lord is speaking directly to me out of this book. And I think you can control whether or not that happens. And the way you do that is you learn what belongs in your basket. And I think everybody's basket's different. So yeah, I think right now the thing that probably helps me most with my growth, helps me most with introspection and self-awareness is coming back to my basket, spending time with the Word, coming back to my basket, and then going and praying, and then rinse and repeat. Because when you get a little older and you take on more responsibility, it's hard to take all the worries and put them in a box and shut them out. It's just hard. It's hard. It gets way harder to do that and then sit down and focus on the Word. It can almost feel less important than taking care of these tangible things, which we know is not true, but it can feel that way. I get up in the morning and I run a company and I gotta go. I get up, I gotta go. I gotta go. I gotta go. And reading the Bible feels like not as important as going and taking care of my first job, which is ridiculous. And so I think the basket helps me remember that a job's a job. It's a means to an end. I make money so that I can bless people. Why do I bless people? Because I love the Lord. And if I choose to do that instead of spending time with Him, it's backwards, right? So yeah, I think it's probably a good summary of life before Christ, the transition, and what it looks like after, immediately, and in the following years. Hope you are blessed by it.